Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Reader, aka Damien, and this is my comic book countdown. I just want to wish a happy birthday to the king. Happy birthday, Jack Kirby. He's over 100 years old now. I can't remember what the age is, actually. I should look that up. So this past week, the comics from August 24th, I only got 7 books, small for me, a small amount for me. Most of them were quite good. I definitely, in terms of thinking about reading this week, I was definitely thinking I've really gotten into the mode of reading single issues, of reading these short slices of longer stories, and I almost feel impatient when I have to sit down and read something longer, or at least sometimes I do. So I guess it's been about 11 or 12 years since I went back to going to comic book shops on a weekly basis, and now it's become so. Before then, for quite a long while, I'd been reading trades, and of course, before then, single issues. Before that, but it's really become my mode of reading that my brain is just used to at this point. Anyway, I will give you a look at my list. At number 7, I'm putting Guilt. This is the 5th and final issue of this story. I really loved the first 3 issues and thought it was going to be one of my favorite comics of the year, but by issue 4 it sort of started to lose me, and I felt really lost and not caring much by issue 5 here. I'm not sure quite all what went wrong. Ahoy has raised their prices to $4.99, and I think this is the end of me buying Ahoy comics in single issues, despite the fact that I much prefer to read things in single issues these days. In at number 6 is Public Domain, Chip Zdarsky's book that seems to be a commentary on Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, and the giant corporate comics behemoth that is Marvel, Disney, or perhaps it's a commentary also on DC, Warner. I find it interesting that right now Chip Zdarsky is a star writer at both those companies. So there's something kind of weird about that. At number 5, I jumped into Wind. So there was an earlier Wind. This is Wind Thrown in the Sky, issue 1. There was an earlier Wind series. It came out from Boom that apparently was written and drawn to be a graphic novel, and then just got broken up into individual issues. And a lot of people reading it said it didn't work well that way, and it made more sense to read it all at once. So at the time, I'd already bought a few issues, so I kept buying the single issues and planning to read them all at once together. But at the moment, I've misplaced most of those issues, and I just have a lot to read. So I decided to just dive right into Wind Thrown in the Sky, and I had a pretty good time. I was able to catch up. It's a 40-page comic, and I think I felt impatient. I wanted a shorter chapter, oddly enough. Look at that. And so, it's a pretty decent fantasy. It didn't, totally wow me, so it ended up at number 5 this week. And then my top 4, I had a great time with all 4 of these comics. I'll put it in at number 4, Lonesome Hunters, by a solo project by Tyler Crook. And the first 2 issues were okay, but with issue 3 here, it really kicked up a notch, and I just had a really fun time reading it, and of course, looking at the art and the storytelling here. And then in at number 3, much to my surprise, because I think I meant to remove this from my poll, I really did not like issue number 1 of Defenders Beyond, but it really charmed me with issue 2. The art and the sort of cosmicness of the art really went up a number of notches, and the story was really goofy, but it's kind of fun. Mostly, I think, because of the art. And then in at number 2, Fables. Just a marvelous read. Fables number 154, so the 4th issue in this Return to Fables. And we're following various children. I'm not sure how many children of the wolf character, the wolf god's children, so to speak. And it's a lot of fun and fantastic art. And finally, speaking of fantastic art, at a higher level than very, very many artists right now, is Jeff Darrow's Shaolin Cowboy. Excellent coloring by Dave Stewart. Although I still would love it if he did something other than yellow skies. I guess we did get a few slightly different color skies, but we'll take a look inside soon. There is an aspect of Shaolin Cowboy that's kind of static, but interestingly, Darrow kind of moved things, did a little fast forward and moved things into a slightly different mode, at least for a little while here. I don't know if, and with kind of a twist at the end of the issue, and I don't know how that'll apply to the next 3 remaining issues. I think it's a 7-issue series. How that will apply in terms of whether it'll feel like just more of the same, the Shaolin Cowboy fighting bizarre things, or whether there'll be some other layers to it. Even without layers, the sense of humor, the fantastic art, and just the general feeling of bizarre wackiness is very satisfying to me in Shaolin Cowboy. And he packs so much in each issue. So there I was complaining about 40 pages in Wind. This is probably 30-something pages and a lot more tightly packed. But somehow it feels like a nice, light chapter, and it hits me in the right spot in terms of reading. This is probably the ugliest Shaolin Cowboy cover, but the issue was awesome. Okay, so I'll turn the camera around. We'll take a look inside these comics, and there might be a little bit of spoilers, especially visually. And then below there'll be some time notations, so if you want, you can skip over that look inside. And then I have a little bit of a haul to show you, and a few comments on a unique indie comic I read this week. Let's see if I can make this work at the picnic table outside. Stay outside. So Guilt that I put in at the bottom at number 7. I think the problem with this is the plot just got very complex very quickly, and they needed to sort of slow down and give me my bearings maybe. Or maybe if I read all the issues in a row, I would keep track of things and it would make a lot more sense. But characters kept appearing at different ages. We got an appearance of Lou Reed. We never get kind of closure with the Lou Reed plot thread. And we got this character kissing the other character, and I cannot remember the full connection of who he is and everything. So maybe if I read it all, in trade fashion, in a single story graphic novel fashion, it would be easier to keep track of. So yeah, throughout the issue, we flash back and forth to different ages, and even then within certain scenes, characters age because of they're being punished or something, and then other sort of random moments happen that I couldn't fully make sense of. So I don't know. It still, had a overall a reading experience that I found a lot of fun. Not for this issue, but for the whole run. But I can't really, at this point, I can't really recommend it to other people. But maybe I'm wrong if you read it all together. Like I said, public domain. We have this. This is a woman who is running the corporation that is kind of a stand-in for Disney Marvel, and she is truly kind of a despicable, horrible person. And like I say, it's just kind of funny seeing Chip Zdarsky, who has been writing at Marvel for a long time and is now writing Batman at DC also, to see him sort of so nastily attack his corporate masters. And to me, the question in my mind is, if he thinks they are this bad, and thinks, there was a horrible, the Stan Lee-like character is presented horribly also. If he thinks that they're this bad, why work for them? There are other ways to earn a living. He was doing pretty well with Sex Criminals at Image. He could have followed up with that with some more indie comics and maybe continued to make part of his living as a commercial illustrator. But instead, he kind of dived full on into the Marvel machine, and he's been very successful at it. So, I don't know. It just strikes an odd chord to me. Otherwise, the main reason this is fairly low on the list is there's something kind of bland and by the numbers about it, and maybe following those numbers, like making the two sons of the Jack Kirby-like character out to be losers who need money, may or may not be kind of an insult to Kirby's actual family. I believe one of his sons is a doctor. I don't know if he's a doctor with a gambling habit and the mob beating him up or anything. But I'm sure that Zdarsky thought, well, this makes for better drama and everything. But there's kind of a weird... It's a very definite attack on the comic book business, but there's also kind of a weird shallowness to all of it, at least for me. I know a lot of other people are kind of loving this. And maybe for me it's partially in the blandness of the art which makes it feel kind of shallow. Wind, which I put in at number 5, it's a fun fantasy novel. It starts out with this flashback to the character's childhood, and as I was reading, I didn't notice this years ago thing. So I was kind of startled when, after this prologue, we're with these characters, and it took me a while to figure out that this character and this character were the children here and here. It took me a while to put it together. But other than that, I really had no hiccups in diving in and reading this second volume of Wind. There's it feels like a fairly well done epic fantasy, and there isn't that much well done epic fantasy in comics, although the number of good fantasy comics has increased of late. And of course there is ElfQuest going way back. So if you're craving a strong fantasy novel, with different races, there's fairies and humans and what are they called? Oddlings or something, people who I guess have just all kinds of odd traits. Oddlings is the wrong term. It's something else. But, and there's Kingdom of Vampires and no doubt other kingdoms. It's pretty good. The art style is not super to my taste, but it's fine. Sometimes the coloring gets a little dull, but overall there are some color, some pages where the coloring's pretty cool, like here. So yeah, I would recommend it depending on the reader. Oh, here, let's see. What have we got here? Is this all one picture? Yes. I did not realize that before. The Lonesome Hunters. As I said, starting with the Lonesome Hunters, these are all ones that, were my definite fun, good reads. The feeling that comic books are really great, came from all 4 of these comics. Tyler Crook goes for a very limited color palette. I believe he is watercolor painting on top of his own line art directly on the page. At least I years ago saw him doing that back in the was it Harrow County days. I saw him at a signing, and there was no one around, and he was just sitting there painting a page. was pretty cool. Plus, actually, you can see him paint pages on his YouTube channel, I believe. But there's places where the colors are really cool, but he goes for much of the time, a certain monotony of the color, and I think that is part of the mood of the story. But if I had any complaint, it was that I wanted a little more variety to the color. But I love the kind of magical world that he's hinting at here. I have a feeling when this ends, I'll wish we could learn more. We're just at the very surface of a magical world that includes these crows or magpies that can control human beings and get power, I think, from their magical artifacts. And and the relationship between the young girl and the older man is becoming more interesting, and overall, I'm just having more and more fun with this as it continues. So, I'm hoping there'll be more than just the initial arc. I imagine it's a lot of work for one guy to do everything here. And more of a group effort, but one artist, I think, doing all the art and colors is Javier Rodriguez. And in Defenders Beyond number 2, we get just a crazy story with higher and higher levels of cosmicness. And actually, a lot of the story is a info dump about cosmic things, like the Beyonders and the different universes that were created one after another, which we'd already seen some of in the previous Defenders miniseries by this same group. But it's all kept lively by this fantastic art by Rodriguez. And I personally feel he's upped his color game from the last issue, where the color just seemed to smother the art, and now the color seems to work really well with the art. He does have this shape, this maze-like shape that they're in, that reoccurs over and over again, and he does not change the color scheme on that, for better or worse. But these layouts are fantastic, and I kind of have to let go of the feeling like once upon a time Marvel kind of combined this cosmic stuff with, like, say, the family story of the Fantastic Four. So you got a nice balance between the cosmic and the personal. And in stories like this, it's pretty much just the cosmic. But the art allowed me to kind of let go and just enjoy it. And there is a sense of humor here. There's little bits and bobs about the characters, including the Beyonder. The Beyonder that we know, because it turns out there's many Beyonders. The story moves on to, at the end of last issue, they revealed the Beyonder appears. At the end of this issue, there's a new revelation, and it's fun. This is looking to be a really fun ride in 5 issues. I almost take it like, what was that series that was a big Jack Kirby tribute? Godland. It almost feels like a Godland kind of experience. It's somewhere between a professional comic and kind of a fanish love letter to things like Jack Kirby and other cosmic things in Marvel 70s comics. In my number 2 spot is the absolutely fantastic Fables series. I'm just repeating myself from other episodes where I love the art. But in subtle ways, Willingham and Leah Loa keep topping themselves. And there's this kind of layout that they have kind of set up for the series, and then they break it in interesting ways. So most pages have a kind of decorative panel on the side. But then here, to sort of change the effect, it's not decorative, it's a continuation of the picture. And there's a fantastic sense of humor in the script, and incredible colors by Lee Lowridge. Everything just feels right. This feels like a comic where everybody involved is kind of in the groove. And Love the appearance of this turtle with a world on his back inside a bowl. Maybe I'll skip the next pages because that's kind of a giveaway. And I very comfortably move from story thread to story thread here without any real problem. I'm enjoying this so much. I also hope I find time to go back when I think it's planned to be 15 issues. It says somewhere. This is chapter 4. I don't know if it's going to be 10 issues or 15 issues, but when the whole thing is done, I'm really looking forward to coming back and reading it all together, and I'll probably get even more details out of it. Or if I ever finish reading the original run of Fables, I'll probably get even more out of it. As I've said before, I've read 2 or 3 trades of the original Fables, but haven't, gotten around to reading them all. And last, and by far, the comic that just hits the crazy funny bone the most, Shaolin Cowboy number 4, Cruel to Be Kin, 4 of 7. Dave Stewart and his army of color flatters are doing a marvelous job now. In case you only heard me complain about issue 1, where I had a little trouble making everything out, they've adjusted their colors to the printed page fantastically, and everything looks great. And like I said, the story kind of takes on a different rhythm than it had before, and it works really well, and it's really fun, and it gives Darrow a chance to create even more wacky scenes, sort of one-off scenes. He has said this is going to be his final Shaolin Cowboy series, which makes it his 4th. And I feel like he's both trying to top himself constantly, which he succeeds at, and he's maybe wanting to throw in as many ideas and concepts as he can of his sort of silly Shaolin Cowboy fights something crazy kind of series. And even like this sequence is a little different than what we've seen from him before. So there he is. He's meditating, being a Buddhist, and balancing on a twig at the top of a tree. And then we go back to the urban setting, and this is where I really realized how much Darrow is topping himself, because he's done these urban scenes before, but it seems like it's next level in detail and insanity this time. And just think of how hard it is it's hard for Darrow to draw, but how hard it is also for the colorists, the army of colorists, to get all of that. It's incredible. And there is a bit of a twist at the end, so I won't go any further. But, and look at these amazing perspectives, because some of this we're seeing kind of from the lizard's eye view. And anyway, fabulous, fabulous comic. Not for everybody. I mean, I have to say, you have to be kind of in that Jeff Darrow frame of mind. It's not just, hey, a good read or a satisfying story. It's a sui generis. It's its own thing, and you either grok it, you either get into it, or maybe you don't, and maybe you'll come back to it some other time and you'll get into it. There are trades out. I don't know if the oversized deluxe hardbacks are still in print. If they are, of the previous series, I highly recommend them. My favorite before this one was the one just before it, which is Who'll Stop the Rain, and you could start right there. That's very much a standalone. The second one, I think it's called Shempa Fei. That would be the one I would recommend not starting with, because that one is the most plotless and the most sort of demanding on the reader's patience, or the viewer's patience, because there's not really much to read in that one. But the very first one, Start Trek, that's very good. And then, like I say, Who'll Stop the Rain is fantastic. And this one is turning out to be fantastic too. You literally could skip Shempa Fei, but I think once you get into Darrow, you'll want to have them all. But Shempa Fei is not much of a read. It's more like an art stunt, if you will. Okay, this was fun looking back into them. I'm gonna flip the camera back around and show you my little haul and my thoughts on one more comic that I read this week.
Oh, I actually like
Hey, so the indie comic, I don't know what defines an indie comic, everyone has a different idea, but the self-published comic that I read this week that I really loved is called Eddie the Office Goblin. This is issue number 2. I got issue number 1 a long time ago, and I think this issue 2 has been available for quite a while, and I just forgot that it was out there. Even though I follow Chris Russ, the author, on not on Instagram. Maybe I follow him on Instagram too, but I follow him on Twitter. That's where I kind of think of him as my Twitter friend. I see posts by him all the time, but I somehow lost track of the fact that there was an issue 2 of Eddie the Office Goblin. And it's just a wonderful take on the life of the corporate cubicle slave, but with a supernatural, hellish kind of, literally hellish kind of world that it's set in. And the art is very satisfying. It does, it very much has a zine kind of feel. But I think when he has a bunch of issues under his belt, he should really publish this as a book. And I could see a lot of people really taking to it. I feel like he's a really talented artist, but he keeps things in the kind of having fun, being an amateur artist zine kind of feeling. So I'll put a link to getting this below. For the amount of book you get, it's on the expensive side, compared to the comics we normally get. But it's a fun item. Or if he ever puts out a whole book, a collection of these, I'll definitely highlight that again. So yeah, Eddie the Office Cop. I relate to it because I spent many years working in a cubicle at an office and doing my best to always be cheerful and friendly to everybody. However one felt about going to work. Okay, and then yesterday I was walking back from the bakery because I was getting some rye bread that we like at the bakery, and of course I was walking right by Excalibur Comics, and I remembered that there was had been unable to get the most recent Detective Comics written by Ram V, so I went into the shop to look for that, and there were some other recent comics. It's kind of one of my backup shops, but oddly and this has happened to them a lot. They were screwed by, I think, most, if not all, of the comic book distributors. So all of their new comics were at least 2 weeks old. And so there was nothing there that I was looking for. So then I looked, they have some boxes on the counter of their recent back issue acquisitions, and I ended up grabbing a bunch of them. First, Iron Man number 41. Iron Man is being melted on the cover. I remember several covers where his armor was melting that I bought as a kid, and that always upset me. The thought of being inside a melting metal armor. That just seemed really disturbing. But I like this cover. The interiors are by George Tuska. I don't think this is a George Tuska cover. I'm not sure who did the cover. Maybe Marie Severin or someone along those lines. And I got just a kind of random issue of Batman. I think it's Irv Novak art and Denny O'Neil inside. And wonderfully, there's a brain in the jar there talking to Batman, saying, "I'm not dead, Batman." And then this was when I came across this cover, this is what unleashed my desire to buy back issues that given day. This cover of the Atom, which is signed by Gil Kane and, not signed on like an original signature, but they signed their artwork, Kane and Anderson. So it was Murphy Anderson inking over Gil Kane's pencils. When I first looked at it, I thought it was Wally Wood inking. Anyway, I just thought this cover was so fantastic, I had to get it. Haven't really read much in the way of Silver Age Atom, but the artwork inside is also by Gil Kane. And I got this other one because I also was charmed by this cover, where the Silver Age Atom is fighting I think the Golden Age Atom, saying this magazine isn't big enough for two atoms. Duel between the dual atoms. And it's one of those covers where it's actually being punched through a comic book cover and you see panels inside. I wonder if some of these panels will actually be panels in the story. And I always grab Hulks from the early part of Herb Trimpe's run. This is Trimpe with John Severin inking him, and it's just fantastic. Girl in the Emerald Atom, so that's kind of a classic one. I think that might be plotted by Harlan Ellison. Let me look inside. Nope, with a welcome plotting assist from Chris Claremont. Wow. So early Chris Claremont, you might say. But tomorrow the sun shall die. Ooh, love panels like that. Oh, there's a lot of sunlight getting in the way. Dappled sunlight. This one's in pretty nice condition. Actually, this one says Cloud9 Comics on it, so this is one I did not get at Excalibur. And then I got an Avengers. I might already have this one, but the cover's really cool. And inside is Tom Palmer inking. And Tom Palmer is definitely a favorite inker, particularly from the late Silver and Bronze Age. So it's Tom Palmer inking over John Buscema. He was one of Buscema's best inkers, one of Neil Adams' best inkers, and definitely, I think, the best inker over Gene Colan. They were a fantastic team. But any book inked by Palmer had an extra pizzazz, extra excitement. I don't know when he stopped inking comics. I was surprised upon hearing of his death to know that he was still around, which means he must have been retired from comics for quite a while. I think he was around 90, I think they said. Then I got this House of Mystery, number 231, with a wonderful Bernie Wrightson cover. The sunlight captures the wrinkles in the plastic. Got to get this into some Mylar. Unfortunately, inside there's no... the artwork's nice, but there's no Bernie Wrightson artwork on the inside. I think he was already... By the time you got comics at the 25-cent comics, the regular size 25-cent comics, I think Bernie Wrightson had already moved on from a lot of interior work and was mostly doing covers. Maybe he was over at Warren Comics doing stuff, and if I recall correctly, he was selling portfolios through the fan presses. And last, but maybe not least, a flash from the 52-page, the year when they jumped up the size of DC Comics to 52 pages. So it has a full Flash story and a Kid Flash story and a Golden Age reprint. I just I just want to get lots. I love, for some reason, getting this era of DC and the few Marvel comics that were at this larger size too, just because this is right when I started reading comics as a kid. So that's my little haul, and thank you for joining me. Let's think about Jack Kirby, think about Tom Palmer, and but comics continue on, and we continue to talk about them. Talk to you all soon.